Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I welcome you. It's my great honor to welcome you all to today's panel at the Cyprus Forum titled Turkish Cypriot Communities' Views on Türkiye's Role and the Prospects of Peace. We convene at a critical historical turning point for Cyprus and the broader region. Just miles from the eastern shores of Cyprus, the specter of the regional conflict looms large, intensified by the ongoing war in Gaza and its ripple effects across countries like Israel, Palestine, Yemen, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. These wild times cast a shadow over Cyprus, where the peace process remains in a state of deadlock. 7 years have passed since the Crans-Montana summit, and yet negotiations to resolve the Cyprus issue have yet to start. The Greek Cypriot side upholds the bizonal formula as it interprets it, as it understands it, while the Turkish side advocates for a fundamentally different approach, the so-called two-state solution. Amid the regional turmoil and impasse, the voices and the perspectives of the Cypriot communities take on significant heightened significance. Today, our focus is on the second largest community of this island, the Turkish Cypriots. In a few moments, we will delve into a comprehensive assessment of their current situation informed by a new scientific research. This study provides invaluable insights into the community's views on the political and economic landscape in the northern part of the Cyprus, their relations with Türkiye, the United Nations, and the Republic of Cyprus, as well as the prospect of reunification solution to the Cyprus problem. I am privileged today to introduce you our distinguished speakers. First, Professor Nina Caspersen, Professor of Comparative Politics and Associate Dean for Research at the University of York, United Kingdom. Professor Caspersen's expertise lies in territorial conflicts, peace processes, and peace settlements. Next, Dr. Sinem Arslan, a visiting research fellow at Middlesex University and a research fellow at the Civil War Path Project at the University of York. Dr. Arslan specializes in comparative peace processes and the de facto status. And lastly, we are honored to have Professor Ahmet Sozen, Professor of International Relations at Eastern Mediterranean University. His recent work, Track to Diplomacy, The Way Out in the Eastern Mediterranean, focuses on the conflict resolution in the region. Today, Professor Caspersen and Arslan will share the findings of their research. This study captures the community's stance on the current political and economic conditions in northern Cyprus, their Turkish Cypriots' relationship with the key international actors, and their vision for the solution of the Cyprus problem. Following their presentation, Professor Sozen will provide an in-depth evaluation of Turkey's evolving policy regarding the Cyprus issue. He will analyze the shift from a bizonal federation to advocating for two sovereign equal sides, examining this change through local, regional, and global lenses. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we navigate these challenging times, the insights shared today are not only timely, but essential for everyone invested in the future of Cyprus and regional stability. I encourage you to all engage actively in the discussions that follow, ask questions, and contribute with your perspectives. So, without further ado, I would like to begin our conversation with my first question to Nina. What about your project? What was the aim, the scope of your project? Could you please introduce us?
Thank you very much, Nicholas. So first of all, thanks to the Cyprus Forum for giving us this opportunity to present our research, and thanks to Ahmet for providing these insights, and thanks to Nicholas, of course, for chairing this panel.
projected, and I also need to click it. Thank you. How do I do it? Is this one? You know everything. So, as a part of a larger project, in context of Turkish Cypriot community, we wanted to understand how the population, elites, and experts within this community think of the current political and economic situation, their relation with three guarantor states, specifically with Türkiye, the UN, and the Republic of Cyprus. Turkey's interference on their domestic affairs, more specifically how the respondents interprets the development concerning 2020 elections, where there are strong allegations that Turkey interfered in this election, as well as the UBP Congress, especially the last two Congress, and also the respondent attitudes toward their preferred status and prospect for reunification. In this context, we combine mass population surveys with in-depth elite and expert interviews. So the survey is conducted in September 2023. The interviews were conducted in between 2022 and 2024. The interview samples include the current and former representative of Turkish chief negotiator and journalists from different political backgrounds. So basically our survey, as I stated previously, was conducted in September 2023 with 1,000 respondents. A random sampling was used to accurately represent the characteristic and to generalize the responses to the whole population. The sample includes 527 male and 472 female respondents sampled from 6 different districts. And one thing the survey clearly shows is, as Nina specified, is the dissatisfaction eventually with the current status quo. This is not a surprise, but there are also dissatisfaction about the level of dependence on Türkiye, and concern have been expressed over Turkey's interference. Our observation, especially based on the interviews, that Turkish Cypriot community still has the willingness, but they feel hopeless about prospect of reunification. And in this sense, lack of trust and security concern are the key issues. One of the major findings is eventually dissatisfaction with the status quo. We can say that our respondents are 97.4% unhappy about the status quo. And then we have, and then we can say that currently the population is unhappy about the economic, social, and political situation, for instance, and the numbers are quite high. Here I will show some of them, but when we ask them about crime, corruption, any kind of social, economic, and political situation, the number were quite high, indicating the dissatisfaction. Among them, for instance, we ask how big of a problem is unemployment and lack of economic development, and it's 98.4%. The respondents said they're unhappy. Another question, how big of a problem is democratic backsliding, and 95.5% the respondents are unhappy about the democratic backsliding. And third issue is like how big of a problem are the restriction of freedom of expression. Restriction on freedom of expression have also been expressed largely in the interviews as well. So the respondents are unhappy 89% of the time.
Sorry, your microphone.
Oh, sorry. And then we ask how big of a problem. So when it comes to the relations with Türkiye, we ask the respondents how big of a problem is the economic dependency on Türkiye. We wouldn't expect that that the respondents will be unhappy to that extent, but they say 87.7% they were unhappy on economic dependency on Türkiye. And then we ask how big of a problem you think that the Turkish involvement in political affairs, especially as I said, since the 2020 elections, there were like quite strong allegations that Turkey interfered in political affairs, and this allegation have actually echoed largely within the population after UBP Congress, and how Turkey, interfere in many political and social situations. So our respondent, 84% of our respondents were actually unhappy about Turkish involvement in political affairs. And then we asked, do you believe that Turkey interfered in 2020 elections? Do you think that these allegations are true? Although there are like strong reports, a lot of academic articles who are actually showing this with lots of evidence. And our respondent, 67.9% of our respondents believe that Turkey interfered in 2020 elections. However, while the population is quite unhappy about how Turkey interfered in political, social, and economic affairs, we have a different picture when it comes to military. So we asked the respondent, how big of a problem is the Turkish military presence? 77% of the respondents believe that Turkish military presence in their territories do not constitute a problem. And then we asked another quite a challenging question, and we said, do you agree with the stationing of Turkish troops and bases in your territory? And so 78.8% of the respondents are actually quite, do they agree with this? And however, while the respondents have some sort of ambivalence towards Turkey's role within their territory, we also see that they have quite a large extent, they have some security fears. So we asked them, how big of a problem is the possibility of war between Turkish and Greek Cypriot communities in the future? Despite the fact that the conflict has frozen in nature for years, actually, 81% of our respondents said that there is a likelihood of conflict between two communities. And then while the Turkish Cypriot community experienced those kind of security fears for future, we also see that they have a high level of mistrust in external actors to the conflict. Turkey, Greece, and UK, we asked whether Turkey, Greece, and UK can be trusted to help the Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot to find a good solution. So basically, only 59% of the respondents believe this statement. Again, we asked them the UN whether or not the UN can be trusted in this sense to find a good solution. Again, UN. They don't believe, 71% of the respondents do not believe that UN is a trustworthy actor in terms of finding a good solution. Among all of these guarantor states, eventually we would expect Turkey would be the most supported. So we ask whether or not Turkish government is interested in finding a peaceful solution, sustainable settlement of the Cyprus conflict. Interestingly enough, while Turkey is the most trusted actor among the all guarantor states, Turkey is only trusted 50%. And we also ask, it's not here, but we also ask them whether Turkey is less interested in finding a good solution to the Cyprus conflict, and they believe 52% of the respondents believe that Turkey is less interested to the Cyprus conflict. So, where do we go from there? What is the road ahead and prospect? What all of this finding tell us about road ahead and prospect for peace and reunification? So basically, we ask, in your opinion, is it realistic for Turkish and Greek Cypriot communities to unify in bizonal, bi-communal federation? So those who said yes, and those who find it realistic, it's only 15.5%. Whereas, the remaining of the respondents actually think that this is not realistic due to the fact that another state would oppose it, no because Turkey would oppose it, no because Turkish Cypriot community would oppose it, no because Greek Cypriot community would oppose it. And those who think that Greek Cypriot community would oppose to a bizonal, bi-communal federation makes 52% of all respondents. And also, in your opinion, what should be the status? So here, we see that there is quite a change since the annual plan of 2004. Unfortunately, we can see that Turkish Cypriot community have actually given 62% of the respondents said that Turkish Cypriot community should have an independent state. Whereas those who said that the status should be a federation remains at 21%. The 5% of the respondents said that status quo should be preserved, and so these are the answers. And we see that actually this shows, I think, level of involvement, Turkey's involvement in level of their political, social, and economic affairs, as well as change of the demography, as well as hopelessness about trust to external actors. And I would like to also give about like Turkish interference, how actually elites and experts actually frame this interference, because in my interviews I actually ask how do you actually call, how do you frame, what do you think about Turkish involvement in political affairs. So we have spoken from lots of actors, from far left to far right, and also the center-left, center-right. We have spoken about around 40 in-depth interview that lasts at least an hour. So some part of the elites and experts think that Turkey's advisors are motherland advisors and they should be followed. Another part said Turkey decides on matters concerning Sinem, which is a city of the region, then why shouldn't it decide on matters of Turkish Cypriot community? And another group said Turkey's recommendation should be considered normal. Actually, we have quite an economic protocol, so IMF also gives some recommendation. Turkey is a financial donor, it gives economic recommendation on how the money should be spent wisely. Then we have another group who said Turkey intervenes on political, economic and social affairs, but politicians can reject them. So it's up to us, it's our politicians' fault. So the responsibility belongs to politicians of accepting it and not to Turkey. Then another group said Turkey intervenes on political, economic, social affairs. Due to international restriction and isolation, our politicians have no other choice than following them. If they don't follow them, they have to bear consequences, and they give examples and instances how they have to bear consequences as politicians. And then we have the far left who actually frame the interference as we cannot talk about the involvement of interference because this is an occupation in our territory. So we have quite a different array of political views ranging from far left to far right. But what I've seen and observed over the last 2 years, because this is a long field of it, is that more and more people are willing to speak openly about Turkish interference in their political affairs. This wasn't the case 2 years ago, and only some actors were actually talking about that because they were like thinking that they would bear consequences in talking. But now people are talking more actually openly, and I'm sure Ahmet will comment on that as well.
It's your third. So, before Ahmet Hoca, I have a general question. Based on these findings, the question is for both of you. What are, from the Turkish Cypriot perspective, what are the main opportunities or challenges for reunification, for a prospect of a solution to the Cyprus problem?
Thank you. So there are clearly both, I think in some ways the challenges might be more noticeable than the opportunities, but I'll try to talk about both. So the absence of trust, the lack of belief in the feasibility of a federal solution is clearly a challenge, and I'll say a little bit more about that. But in terms of opportunities, well, the unhappiness with the status quo, including what we thought was actually a surprising level of dissatisfaction with interference, that does point to possible opportunities if a credible strategy for reunification is presented. Now, in this kind of context, with a lack of belief in a shared future, a lack of trust in key actors, normally what you would recommend with policy recommendations would be, well, you need trust and confidence building measures. And I agree with that. I agree that this is important. It's also clearly very challenging. It's clearly very sensitive in any context, and we know this from our comparative work, in any context involving unrecognized entities. That said, it is possible. Some cases go much further than others when it comes to that. And I certainly thought it was heartening to see the two mayors of Nicosia yesterday sharing the stage, talking about the need and the importance of collaboration on shared challenges and shared interest. Now, collaboration and contacts and dialogue, it doesn't in itself produce a solution, but it makes reunification easier to imagine as a likely future. And this is really important. Again, this is something we know from the comparative evidence that in order for peace to be possible, it has to be believed. People have to believe that it can be realized in order for it to actually happen. So there are some opportunities there to make that seem more like a possible and likely future. Now, you might point out, and that's certainly something I would notice, that our survey also showed a strong preference for independence, for a two-state solution, and overwhelming support for continued Turkish military presence.
Just one moment. Yes. Hello, guys. Please be seated.
Feel free.
Okay.
Okay.
We can continue.
I'll continue. Welcome. It's good that our audience has increased by at least 50%. So I thought it was worth pausing for. So I'll just repeat what I was saying. That there are certainly aspects in our work that point to significant challenges when it comes to the prospect for peace, including the strong preference expressed for a two-state solution and also overwhelming support for continued Turkish military presence on the island. And I certainly suspect that the current Turkish government leaders, this is the part of our findings that they would focus on. On the other hand, and I'd be very keen to hear Ahmet's view on this, my understanding is that independence has long been the first preference among majority of the Turkish Cypriot community, but this doesn't mean that compromise isn't acceptable, that a second preference isn't acceptable, as it was when we had the Annan Plan referendum. I don't think that was the first preference then either. So moreover, I think when it comes to the Turkish military presence, I mean, we've long known that security fears, broadly understood, will need to be addressed in whatever solution is found, and I mean, the Transpantana talks did include that, and went, as far as I know, a long way into finding a solution to that. So I don't think that should be seen as a sort of insurmountable obstacle. That said, I am fully aware that this is the optimistic version of what you can read from these findings. There is little doubt that the increased Turkish interference, which comes out very clearly both in interviews and also in the survey, is a problem for peace. Is a clear obstacle, especially the very vocal opposition from Ankara to a federal solution. Again, it would be useful to discuss this further. I'd be very keen to hear what Ahmet says, but it might be that some form of constructive ambiguity is needed when it comes to how a solution is framed, what it's called, what terms are used. So, just to wrap up, I mean, this is certainly a challenging situation. There's no denying that. But there is a need and also an opportunity, I think, for being creative, for making the Turkish Cypriot community believe that another round of peace talks can succeed, and that a shared future is possible and present a feasible and this would present a feasible alternative to continued and increased Turkish control, and that's needed. And based on our comparative research, we would expect such a belief in the shared future to reduce the level of patron state influence in an entity. So I think there is, and Colin Stewart said that yesterday in his opening remarks, there is a fleeting opportunity, but these opportunities are becoming more constrained, and this moment is unlikely to last. So sort of on an optimistic note, I would say it might be short-lived, but it's important to make the most of it.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Now, it's your turn, Ahmet Hoca. Based on these remarks, what is your insight? Can we have still have hope? Or it's totally hopeless? Let's end the discussion.
Okay, you got me on the wrong side. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation, and I would like to congratulate Nina and Sinem for their study. It's really a very valuable study. Indeed, why we are talking about Turkey today is that Turkey is a very important actor on the Cyprus issue. It has always been an important actor on the Cyprus issue. It's not something new. In fact, I would argue that both Turkish interventions as well as Greek interventions have always been in Cyprus since the beginning of the Cold War. But the degree of Turkish interventions increased by the time, and the Greek interventions decreased. And I'll try to put things into a perspective today, into a context, as to try to explain to you how we came to where we are today, which is a kind of impasse, a kind of deadlock in the Cyprus issue since the collapse of the Cyprus conference in Crans-Montana and the adoption of a new policy by the Turkish side, which they broadly define as instead of a bizonal bicommunal federation, we only negotiate the sovereign, equal status of the two sides, which some people call simply as two-state solution. Now, while trying to put things into perspective, I will try to explain things on three different levels as to how we came to this impasse. And these three levels are basically global, systemic level, what's happening or what is happening on the global level, which can influence things on Cyprus, what is happening on the regional level, and what is happening on the local level. In most of my studies, I start with the global level, but today I would like to start from the domestic level. Now, the Cyprus intercommunal talks or intercommunal negotiations started the year I was born. Guess which year? 1968 in Beirut, between two interlocutors, Mr. Denktash and Mr. Kleridis, who were not the leaders at that time. And then those negotiations were transferred to Nicosia. And they went on and off until 1974. So, and during this time, after the division of the island into two parts after 74, we have some important, what I call milestones. 1977, 1979, Makarios Denktash and Denktash Kyprianou high-level agreements, which set out the parameters of a future solution that both sides at least on paper, agreed that the future solution to the Cyprus problem will be a bizonal, bicommunal federation. And those continued, meaning the negotiations, on and off, all the time negotiations taking place under the UN auspices, focusing on those parameters, trying to reach a bizonal, bicommunal federation. Now, the Annan Plan, or the run-up to the Annan Plan, 2002 to 2004, was also a very important milestone. It was the very first time and the last time that there was a finished comprehensive solution plan ever been tabled. Not before. Everything before were like draft framework agreements of 2 pages, 5 pages, but Annan Plan, 180 something pages plus 10,000 pages of federal laws and 3 constitutions. So it was the first and the last time. So it was a missed opportunity for some it's different. Now, fast forward, the Geneva talks was the sort of start of a 5-party conference for the first time after the Cyprus, Zurich and London Accords that brought the 2 sides as well as the 3 motherlands, well, not 3 motherlands, sorry, it was a Freudian slip, I think, 2 motherlands and United Kingdom, the former colonial master, plus EU as an observer. Now that was also a very important, I think, turning point in Cyprus, and since Crans-Montana, the collapse, it created this long process of negotiations, not leading to a breakthrough, created a frustration and an exhaustion, especially on the Turkish foreign policymakers, which triggered why they changed their policy from supporting a federal solution to their current policy. So this is the sort of domestic level why things sort of triggered this new policy. Of course, on the global and regional level, there were developments which pushed or encouraged Turkey to adopt this policy. Now, on the global level, we have been going through what I call a power transition for some time, from a unipolar, some sort of unipolar world to a something else that we cannot really put our finger on, some sort of multipolar world, which created these vacuums, which are basically opportunities or seen as opportunities by some regional actors to assert their sovereignty and visibility and whatnot and influence in their regions. And of course, on the regional level, at some point, Turkey started EU accession talks, but then all of a sudden, starting 2005, 6, 7, things went south. Some of the European leaders like Sarkozy, Merkel were not really helpful in integrating Turkey to EU, so Turkey drifted away. I'm just fast forward, by the way. And then the Arab Spring, the Gezi movements, and the authoritarian turn that Turkey took since then made things more complicated and pushed or encouraged Turkey to take this new policy, what they call the equal sovereign equality and equal status policy. So these are, I'm not saying that I do agree with this position, by the way. You will see in a few minutes what my evaluation is. But this is a kind of, I argue, an objective, to a certain extent, explanation on 3 different levels why we came to where we are. Now, after Crans-Montana, a lot of people asked, do you think that Crans-Montana was a watershed? Meaning that things are not going to be the same again? Or this is yet another bump on the road and then we'll pick up the pieces and continue on the Cyprus issue? And I don't know yet, personally. For some people, it's a watershed. But maybe this is, there's a nice saying in Turkish, which I will roughly explain or translate, showing the death and getting the other side to accept malaria. Ölümü gösterip sıtmaya razı. Meaning the death is the 2 states, and then malaria bizonal bicommunal federation. So it's sort of upping the ante before formal negotiation. Now, so the real question now is whether this new policy that Turkish side takes, Turkish Cypriot leadership, is it a radical departure from traditional Turkish foreign policy on Cyprus? Or this is tactical, as I tried to explain before? It's yet to be seen, but we have been seeing some moves on both sides, which are retaliating each one's steps. For example, opening part of the fenced area of Varosha by Turkey was like a response to the Greek Cypriot government's policy on the energy issue, refusal to make it part of the peace negotiations. And now, for example, the Republic of Cyprus government issues arrest warrants for people who have been building in the north. So all these are sort of on the back burner retaliatory steps or actions. Now, coming to another question, which is relevant, is the 2-state solution possible in Cyprus or viable? And before I answer this question, I would try to give you a very fast sort of journey on the Cyprus intercommunal negotiations by some pictures, all right? Now, do you remember we used to have black and white pictures? That tells a lot about how old this conflict is, right? Do you remember these guys? That's Mr. Klididis, UN Chief Kurt Waldheim, and Mr. Denktash. Fast forward, black and white continues, right? The 2 high-level agreements, and oops, yeah, came to color. So, time's passing. Do you remember the guy in the middle? Richard Holbrooke, the architect of the Bosnia, the Dayton peace accords. He also came to Cyprus claiming that he will bang heads of the 2 leaders and iron out a solution, but he became part of this, what I call the graveyard of diplomats on the Cyprus issue. So leaders change, secretary generals change, leaders change, secretary general change. Do you see any problem on this picture? Any conflict? You have one ethno-nationalist and one communist having a good time, right? Okay, again, leaders change, secretary general change, COVID comes, COVID goes. Okay, so drinking the national drink Zivania. Let's see if it helps. So far, no. Now, should we be hopeful from this process, which has been going on for a very long time? Now, we ask people, just like Nina and Sinem, and some of the polls that we have conducted on both sides of the island, are you hopeful that the Cyprus negotiations will lead to a solution? Well, majority are saying that I don't have any hope. Now, we changed the question and we ask people, but do you desire, do you want Cyprus negotiations to be finalized with a solution? Then majority say yes. Okay, so hopes are down, and I think it's only normal. We are talking about a process, just the negotiation process, which is the same age with myself. So we cannot really realistically expect people to have hopes. But nonetheless, the desire is there. We also tested alternative solution models starting the year 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, and very consistently, it goes like this. The first preference of majority of Greek Cypriots always comes as unitary state, and the first preference of Turkish Cypriots comes as two states. Preference, I'm saying. A bizonal, bicommunal federation is the second preference for both communities. But then, if you look at these results more closely, you see this. Among the other alternatives, continuation of the status quo, confederation, two states, whether we like it or not, there is only one alternative that has the chance to pass from the majority vote on both sides. And that is a bizonal, bicommunal federation. The second preference of both sides. Because the other alternatives will be either rejected by one side or by both sides. So that's my pragmatic answer also as to what is viable for Cyprus that can be acceptable by majority of the people on both sides. All right, I'm not going to go into like if there is a referendum tomorrow, how do you vote? We have tested all these things. I also want to show you this slide, which I think is very important. We ask average people, average Cypriots on both sides of the UN divide, what is the most important negotiation issue for you? And 70% on both sides, more than 70% say security. Number one concerns of average people, security. You go to the, on the left side, where we ask people, what about the competencies of the constituent states and the federal states? Not too many people care. On the average people, they don't care. But of course, I also have the hunch that if we ask this question, not to the average Cypriots, but political elites, I don't think that this will be the result. The power sharing and the competencies of future federal and constituent states, they do matter for the political elite because they see themselves there. Anyways, prospects. And I think I'll close in 2 minutes or so. Are we going to have something like this again? Geneva 2017. I like this picture. It looks like Mission Impossible. Like this, some of these friends, the UN good offices and whatnot who have been working on the Cyprus problem. Such a picture. Sometimes a picture says more than 1,000 words, right? Mr. Akıncı and Kojas joking aside, and you know. And then the day after the dinner, I think the UN chief is more in more trouble nowadays, especially he's issued as persona non grata by Israeli authorities. Anyways, now joke aside, prospects, when it comes to the domestic dynamics, meaning when I look at the leadership, the current two leadership now, Mr. Tatar on the Turkish Cypriot side, who outspokenly is against a federal solution, and Mr. Christodoulidis on this side, whose track record is a bit iffy. I don't see domestic dynamics leading us towards any type of meaningful negotiation process, start of a negotiation process, unfortunately. My only hope is regional dynamics.
Recording in progress.
Really? You were not recording up to now? Okay. Now, whether we like it or not on reality, a lot of statesmen, statespeople are focusing on the elections, which is a month from now. Not here. Across the Atlantic. So the US elections, they are waiting, and of course, by the time the new president will be inaugurated, it will be January. So a lot of countries, a lot of people are putting things on ice now, trying to see whether it's going to be Trump or Harris who is going to come. And they have been developing their alternative scenarios as to what course of action they are going to take. But it seems like the UN chief is putting some efforts on the Cyprus issue. The two sides are coming for an informal dinner on the 15th of next month. As I said, not that I expect something from these two nice gentlemen, but nonetheless, if regional dynamics can enter, and let's put a name on it, the elephant in the room, whether Turkey will be integrated back into the Eastern Mediterranean, the arithmetic of the Eastern Mediterranean, is very important. What will Mr. Erdogan get in this arithmetic is very important. In this arithmetic where, for various different reasons, partly due to Turkey's policies themselves, that they were isolated in the region for a long time, and they called this a precious loneliness, and then they decided that this is not so precious. So they started normalizing with Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and whatnot. But then what is happening in Israel, Palestine, sort of put a halt on things. Now, how things will develop on this region will determine what's going to also happen in Cyprus. But the Western Alliance, if there is something like that ever, are also trying to strengthen their solidarity against Russia. So in this architecture, maybe a new initiative can start in Cyprus. But in any case, we are faced with three obstacles. Number one, designing the settlement, the actual text, which will be acceptable to all the sides in Cyprus, as well as the guarantors. Number two, whether we like it or not, I think we got stuck with the referendum, which was originally installed to bypass Mr. Denktash, but now I think we are sort of stuck with it. Whether a solution can pass simultaneously from referendum is the second obstacle. Number three, whether this time, compared to 1960 Republic of Cyprus, whether we will be able to make it work. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. We have a few moments, minutes for the last round. I will choose to have a more personal personal character round and ask Nina, Sinem, what are your last insights, last comments on personal level. What are your conclusions as a foreign observer to this situation, based on your research, to the reality, to nowadays reality of Cyprus and Cyprus issue?
That's a tricky question.
I know, but I'm asking.
So my work is comparative. So I look at a number of different conflicts across the world, many of them involving unrecognized entities, all of them difficult to resolve, and all of them getting more difficult to resolve, it seems. And I think that's very much true for the Cyprus conflict as well. I mean, it's never been easy cleared it up. I mean, Ahmet has shown how many leaders and secretary generals have tried to find a solution. That said, compared to some of the other conflicts I'm looking at, I've always thought that this one should be one of the easier ones, comparatively speaking, to find a solution. The fact that the Annan plan was agreed, was supported by one community, I mean, shows that there is potential there. But it's clearly it's clearly a challenging situation now. That said, I guess what we do know from other conflicts is that things can change quite quickly. And if the sort of regional, international dynamics align, then there can be an opportunity. And I guess the important thing is to then make sure that there is a readiness to take that opportunity. And I think that's where the sort of confidence building measures and other things are important. As I said, they're not on their own going to lead to a solution, but it creates a greater preparedness for a solution. And also, as Ahmet says, the referendum model is probably one we're stuck with. So that is clearly important. It's important anyway, but it's even more important when you have to have a referendum in both communities, and that it has to be acceptable, possibly in quite a short time. So not that much time to sell it to the constituency. So you need to have the peace constituency early on. It's a slightly vague answer.
Thank you again. Sinem?
To be honest, I think that what is the most important thing here for both communities, as Ahmet rightfully said, is the security issue. I believe that if this can be resolved for both communities, I mean, Turkey's role also, I believe, would decrease in the Turkish Cypriot community. But I kind of disagree. I mean, as a scholar who works on comparative peace processes, I mean, after analyzing so many peace agreements, so many conflicts in different parts of the world, we know that peace processes that do not include the public's willingness, the civil society, I mean, and they're less likely to endure. So making an agreement on the top level, eventually Turkish Cypriot community, they have the constitution that gives the authority to the representative, the highest level, the ability to negotiate an agreement. But however, like in other contexts, unless the public is included, unless the public's grievance is included in the process, this is less likely gonna be accepted. But not even if accepted, it's less likely gonna be, solid in the future. So I believe security concerns is key. As long as this can be resolved, also the agreement includes different opinion, then why not?
Ahmet Hoca, do you agree? Security is the key?
As the scientific data shows, it's the key for the average citizens.
Average citizens.
I'm not so sure whether it's the case for political elites, but I think it's a very important issue that needs to be tackled, and there are a lot of innovative ways that can happen and that should happen, rather than the two sides focusing on their positional bargaining, like what has transpired so far. One side saying never with guarantees, the other side says never without guarantees. So how do you solve that? That positional barrier? You cannot. Then you have to unpack security, because security itself has many dimensions, human security to many other areas, aspects, and tackle each one separately, which we have at least some Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriot researchers we have done back in 2016, what we call building a new security architecture for United Cyprus, where we look at different aspects based on scientific study of focus groups, polling, and whatnot. What are the concerns, day-to-day security concerns of people that we can, in fact, address in a future solution, rather than sticking or stacking with the positional bargaining on whether guarantees or no guarantees. So, indeed, it is very important. Now, let me also say this. When we are going to solve, if ever, solve the Cyprus problem, I coined the term 10-something years ago. I called it Belgiumization of Cyprus. I like creating these sexy terms so that we can motivate some thinking and whatnot. And when I say this in some conference, they say, oh, Professor, you got it wrong. Belgium is not a good example. I said, okay, don't insult my knowledge. I know, I've been to Belgium maybe 30 times. I know that the French-speaking Walloons and the Dutch-speaking Flemish do not necessarily love one another. But nonetheless, remember several years ago, there were elections and they couldn't establish a government for more than 400 days. And I asked, what happened to Belgium? And I think that the answer is very telling. Nothing. They continue. So this is what we need in Cyprus. A rational business partnership to start. If that ever evolves into love affair, fine. If not, yeah, let's continue having this civilized relationship. Because we already have a civilized relationship now, which is this negative piece that we have in Cyprus. Crossings are there. This is only a mere ceasefire since 1974. But nonetheless, people are not killing one another and whatnot. So there is a level of civility, which in some conflicts, they actually take us as an example. So let's build on this and further this to starting with a business partnership and see if this can turn into a love affair. It's even better.
Thank you very much for your insights. I personally have two conclusions. One is that Turkish Cypriots have their separate reality. Why? Because they have separate problems, huge socio-political problems. We are talking about a community that cannot agree even who is Turkish Cypriot. Go and ask a Turkish Cypriot, who is Turkish Cypriot, who is Cypriot? A Cypriot with generations, grandmother, great-great-grandfather. What about people born in the island after 74? You cannot find a crystal clear answer. Turkish Cypriots, so they have their separate reality and they have also their separate priority. And the priority is two-state solutions. This is the reality, whether you take it, whether you like it or you don't like it. But, based on the remarks of Ahmet Hoca, we have a common second bicommunal reality. What is this? The second best solution.
Second preference.
Second preference. What is the second preference? BBF. Bizonal, bicommunal federal solution. But it's a tricky one. This issue is a tricky one. Ahmet Hoca mentioned it. What do we understand from BBF in order to make it work? Don't forget, we had a kind of solution back in 1960, the Cyprus Republic. We couldn't make it work, right? So, the last point of Ahmet Hoca, make it work. for me, is the essential part. So, with my conclusions, we are going to end this round, and we have a few minutes for your insights, for your comments, for your questions. We can collect, if you want, the questions, and then address them collectively. Yes, please. Let's start. Please.
Thank you so much. I have two questions to Ahmet. One is actually kind of informatory. So when was the survey the results of the survey, when was the survey conducted? So that's the first question. And the second question is, assuming that the moves of Erdogan and his government is tactical, if the regional and global conditions do not work in favor of a peaceful resolution to the conflict in the island, then how then do you read the future look? How would it look like, in your opinion? Thank you.
Are you going to answer? Whatever you want. Can we collect a few questions? So, for the gentleman.
Yes. Hello. Thank you so much for a great presentation. I'm Uffe Hvidkjær. I'm from Denmark and the chair of Europe Dialogue. Interesting point about Belgium. So I want to ask a little bit more about European Union. Yesterday there was a nice session here about Cyprus, 20 years in European Union, and in 2026 Cyprus has the EU presidency. So could EU make a difference, you know? And also with you mentioned Turkey, and that Turkey is still an EU candidate, but really not much happens. But a solution on the Cyprus issue, could that make a difference with Turkey and EU? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady.
Thank you. I'm Mina Yücel. I'm a researcher. I did most of the research that was mentioned here, actually. Mine is a comment more than a question, but because this might seem more of a pessimistic outlook of what Turkish Cypriots might prefer, the one thing Turkish Cypriots hate most is the status quo. So when you ask them whether they would actually vote yes or no for a referendum, the most recent is actually 2 weeks ago that we finished in the poll. It's still 60% yes for a referendum, for a BBF basically.
Yeah.
If there is a possibility for a federal solution, Turkish Cypriot side will not be the one that will say no to a federal solution, just to clear that out. Thanks.
Someone else? Another question? Yes.
Thank you, Sinem. The poll results I showed was dated about 10 years ago, but these are coming very, how shall I put it, Mina knows better, steadily they don't change. So it's the same when we redo them. Now your second question is if regional dynamics are not in the favor of a solution in Cyprus, people were asking me, is the status quo sustainable? And I said, very much so. Unlike what the international community says, that the status quo in Cyprus is unsustainable. No, I'm sorry. It is very sustainable. It has been going on for a very long time. But the status quo in Cyprus is not static. We have to take this into consideration. Things are changing every day as we speak. More buildings, demographics, da-da-da-da. All right? So, the question we should ask, can Turkey afford the policy it follows today? It does. Does Turkey have the luxury to do this? Currently, I think so. Which brings me to whether the two-state solution is possible. No, it's not. And I'm not talking about the P5 of the UN or the EU member countries. Even those countries who could be termed as friends of Turkey are not supporting this policy. Because this is basically something where you have to challenge the principle of territorial integrity, which is very important in international law. So in that sense, I don't see that this is a realistic position, but nonetheless, as I said, this is a power transition going on. This is a times of uncertainty where some countries can afford pursuing such policies. Now, so in that sense, Turkey can continue, in my opinion. Now, let me also say that Turkey, indeed, from the very beginning of my presentation, a very important actor, but not enough to solve the Cyprus problem. Let me put it also, things into perspective. You need to get the Greek Cypriot leadership also on board sincerely, not in words, but also in deeds. The role of the EU, I always make this, the Cyprus became a member with the Treaty of Accession, 2003. And there is a protocol, 10, to Treaty of Accession, which describes the EU's role vis-à-vis Turkish Cypriots or northern part of Cyprus or whatever you call it, occupied areas, depending on where you go. You know what the EU uses in that Protocol 10 to refer to the northern part of Cyprus? Not north, not northern, not TRNC, quotation without, nothing. 21 words. Count if you can, if you do not believe me. Those areas of the Republic of Cyprus in which the government of Republic of Cyprus does not exercise effective control. And I go, bravo, very creative. Now, joke aside, the EU's perspective regarding the Turkish Cypriots and North Cyprus, in my opinion, is extremely legalistic and very narrow. We need engagement, real engagement with political elites, not what they call civil society. In some cases, what is known as civil society is not genuine civil society, which are these NGOs or whatever who are out there to grab some of the EU and whatever money which is floating around. So, real engagement we need. What Nina mentioned, maybe some of the real confidence-building measures. For example, energy. We don't have a technical committee on energy, for God's sakes. There is climate crisis. There is renewable energy initiatives taking place, and we don't talk to one another. This is unbelievable. So the EU can play a role, especially, by also telling the Greek Cypriot side that this recognition paranoia is also an important block. There are ways of solving problems. Look at last year, Israel and Lebanon, two countries who are at war, who do not recognize one another, but nonetheless, they managed to have maritime border limitation agreement. Very creative. They involved US mediation. They have two agreements, Israel-US, Lebanon-US. They didn't negotiate directly at all. They also involved non-state actors like Total. So there are a lot of ways that we can actually experiment with in order to increase cooperation between the two sides and make things genuinely integrative and cooperative. That will also help us for the day after if we ever reach a federal solution, because a federation is a structure that requires cooperation. How do we jump from this, which is lack of cooperation culture and experience between the two sides, into the day after where we are going to have full-fledged federation that requires cooperation of the two sides.
Yes, Nina?
I just wanted to jump in on some of these issues as well. And first to respond to Mina, and actually first of all just to thank you for doing such an excellent job with our survey. I only recognised you later on. I should have mentioned that as well. And then just to respond to your point about your recent survey results, which I think are really interesting, of course, really positive, that 60% would still support a federal solution. I don't think that means that public opinion and belief in a federal solution is something that can be ignored and taken for granted, because of course that could change. But also, if there isn't a belief in the feasibility of that solution, so even if people would vote yes if it ever came to happen, if there isn't a belief in the feasibility, then of course the risk is that people start preparing and start acting based on a new reality, based on what they think is going to be the long-term situation, and that of course includes the dependence on Turkey, the control of Turkey on the territory. So I think that's the risk, and that's why I think the belief in the shared future, the belief in reunification is still so important. Because what we've seen, I think, in other conflicts is that once that disappears, or maybe didn't exist in the first place, I mean, it cements divisions and it sort of consolidates the separation, and I think that's clearly something to be avoided. But that's why I keep coming back to these confidence-building measures and engagement, why I think it is so important. I completely agree that is where the EU can help. And one thing, I mean, I've done quite a lot of work on engagement with unrecognised entities, and there is, governments will always say, oh, there are these red lines, and they will come up with these various creative wordings that are necessary in order to engage and have various red lines, but these red lines differ from case to case, which shows that it's not sovereignty as such that means that there are these very definite red lines. There are actually lots of things you can do with unrecognised entities while still maintaining a policy of non-recognition, and the EU can do that too. And so there is some scope there. And then this final comment is also to echo what's been said about the status quo. It's certainly it would be a mistake to view, I think, any conflict as a frozen conflict. Conflicts are not frozen. Conflicts change all the time, and dynamics can change very rapidly. I mean, I started doing work on unrecognised entities nearly 20 years ago. They looked very different then from what they do now. Some of them don't even exist anymore. Others have more or less effectively been incorporated into their patron states. So things do change, and they were described as frozen conflicts when I first started studying them. So I think that's important to keep in mind, and that might also give a sense of urgency to finding a solution, that we can't just count on things being the way they are now forever. So I think that's certainly for the political leadership, that's an important message to get across.
Look at what happens now in Lebanon. Yeah? It used to be a kind of frozen conflict, right? And now we have our... So, Sinem, you have something to add? Okay. Another question, remark? If it is not, this is all, folks. Thank you very much for your company. Thank you very much, Nina, Sinem, and Ahmet Hocam.
And thank you very much for moderating.